heart of a quiet, mist-shrouded village, nestled between tangled forests and rolling hills, there stood an old, weathered house. Its walls had faded to a pale, ghostly gray, and its windows, clouded with age, seemed to watch the world with a silent, mournful gaze. For years, the house had been abandoned, left to the mercy of the wind and rain, until a young woman named Lynn arrived. Drawn by stories of a forgotten inheritance, Lynn had always been skeptical about tales of the supernatural. She believed in what she could see and touch, and the idea of ghosts or haunted objects seemed little more than the stuff of bedtime stories. But as she stepped through the creaking doorway of her late grandmother's house, she could not shake a sense of unease that prickled at the back of her neck. The air inside was thick with the scent of dust and old memories, and every step echoed through the empty rooms like the footsteps of invisible guests. As Lynn explored the house, she discovered a small, dimly lit room at the end of a narrow hallway. The door, swollen with age, groaned as she pushed it open. Inside, the room was filled with relics of the past. Faded photographs, yellowed letters, and shelves lined with porcelain dolls. Most were chipped and worn, their painted faces frozen in eerie smiles. But one doll, seated in the center of the shelf, stood out from the rest. It was a delicate creation, dressed in a tattered blue dress with lace trim. Its hair, once golden, had dulled to a pale straw, and its glass eyes, an unsettling shade of green, seemed almost alive. Lynn felt an inexplicable chill as she gazed at the doll, as if it were watching her, waiting for something. Shrugging off the feeling, Lynn set about cleaning the house, determined to make it her own. She dusted the shelves, swept the floors, and opened the windows to let in the light. But no matter how much she tried to ignore it, the doll's presence lingered in her thoughts. At night, when the wind howled outside and the shadows crept across the walls, she would sometimes imagine she heard the faintest sound of porcelain tapping against wood, or the soft rustle of lace. Days passed, and Lynn began to notice strange occurrences. She would leave the doll on its shelf, only to find it in a different position later, its head tilted, its arms outstretched, its gaze fixed on the door. At first, she blamed her own forgetfulness, certain she had simply moved it without realizing. But the incidents grew more unsettling. One evening, as dusk settled over the village, Lynn prepared to go to bed. She glanced into the doll room and saw, to her relief, that all was as she had left it. But in the middle of the night, she awoke to a soft scraping sound. Her heart thudded in her chest as she listened, straining to hear. The sound came again, slow, deliberate, as if something was being dragged across the floor. Summoning her courage, Lynn crept from her bed and tiptoed down the hallway. The house was silent, save for the rhythmic ticking of an old clock. She reached the doll room and hesitated, her hand trembling on the doorknob. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open. The room was empty, except for the dolls. But the blue-dressed doll was no longer on the shelf. Instead, it sat in the center of the room, its glass eyes gleaming in the moonlight. Lynn swallowed hard, her mind racing for explanations. Perhaps the doll had fallen and rolled across the floor, she reasoned. Though the distance seemed too great, trying to calm herself, Lynn picked up the doll and returned it to its place. But as she turned to leave, she felt a sudden, icy draft brush past her, and the door slammed shut behind her. The room plunged into darkness, and Lynn's breath caught in her throat. She fumbled for the doorknob, but it would not budge. In the silence, she heard a faint, whispering voice, soft and sibilant, like the rustle of silk. Stay with me.
The words seemed to echo from the walls, and Lynn's skin crawled with fear. She pressed herself against the door, desperate to escape, but the voice grew louder, more insistent.
Stay with me. Don't leave me alone. Suddenly the room grew cold, and Lynn felt a pressure on her arm, as if invisible fingers were gripping her tightly. She looked down and saw the doll, its tiny porcelain hand wrapped around her wrist. Its eyes, once lifeless, now glowed with a strange, unnatural light. With a surge of panic, Lynn yanked her arm free and flung the doll across the room. It struck the wall with a sickening crack, and for a moment the whispers ceased. The door creaked open and Lynn stumbled into the hallway, gasping for breath. She slammed the door shut and fled to her bedroom, locking the door behind her. That night, sleep eluded her. Every creak and groan of the old house set her nerves on edge, and she could not shake the feeling that something was watching her, waiting for her to let her guard down. When morning finally came, she resolved to rid herself of the cursed doll once and for all. She gathered the doll and carried it to the edge of the forest, where the trees grew thick and the shadows were deep. With trembling hands, she dug a hole beneath an ancient oak and buried the doll, whispering a prayer for peace. As she covered the grave with earth, she felt a strange relief, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. But that night, as she lay in bed, Lynn heard the sound again, the soft scraping of porcelain on wood. She sat up, her heart pounding, and stared into the darkness. Slowly the door to her room creaked open, and in the pale moonlight, she saw a small familiar figure standing in the doorway. The doll, its dress stained with dirt, its eyes burning with a cold green fire, had returned. Lynn screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the shadows. The doll moved closer, its tiny feet tapping against the floor. Its mouth, once painted in a delicate smile, now twisted into a cruel grin. Stay with me, it whispered, its voice echoing through the room. Lynn scrambled backwards, but the doll was relentless. It climbed onto the bed, its porcelain fingers reaching for her throat. Lynn struggled, her hands clawing at the sheets, but the doll's grip was unyielding. The room spun around her, and the last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the doll's gleaming eyes, filled with a hunger that was centuries old. When the villagers found the house days later, they discovered it in disarray. The furniture was overturned, the windows shattered, and the air was thick with an unearthly chill. Of Lynn, there was no sign, only a single blue-dressed doll sitting in the center of the room, its glass eyes fixed on the door, waiting for its next companion. Over time, the story of the haunted doll spread throughout the village, whispered among neighbors, and passed down through generations. Some said the doll was possessed by the spirit of a lonely child, abandoned and forgotten. Others believed it was a vessel for something far older and more malevolent, a force that fed on fear and loneliness, drawing strength from the souls it claimed. No one dared enter the house after that, and the doll remained, a silent sentinel in the darkness. On stormy nights when the wind howled through the trees and the rain battered the windows, villagers claimed they could hear the faint, eerie sound of a child's laughter drifting from the abandoned house. Sometimes they would see a flicker of movement in the shadows, a flash of blue, a glint of green eyes, before the darkness swallowed it whole. And so the house stood empty, a monument to the secrets and sorrows of the past. The doll waited, patient and unblinking, for someone brave or foolish enough to enter its domain. For once you crossed the threshold, There was no escape from its chilling embrace. The legend served as a warning to all who heard it. Some objects are better left undisturbed, their stories buried with the dead. For in the quiet corners of the world, where the line between the living and the dead grows thin, the past is never truly gone. It lingers, watching, waiting, and sometimes it moves. So if you ever find yourself in a forgotten house, and you come across a doll with glassy green eyes and a tattered blue dress, remember the tale of Len and the haunted doll. Resist the urge to pick it up, to bring it home, or to listen to its whispered pleas. For once you do, you may find yourself drawn into a nightmare from which there is no waking, trapped forever in the cold, unyielding arms of a doll that moves when no one is watching. And as the shadows close in around you and the whispers grow louder, you will understand the true meaning of fear. The fear of being alone, the fear of being watched, and the fear that somewhere in the darkness, something is waiting for you, longing for your company, forever. If this story chilled you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. More whispers await in the dark.